Hi, Mark.
Hey Kathy, how are you?
I'm good. Just making sure everything's working right. Last time I used the system, it was using the laptop for one thing and the headphones for another. It was totally confusing me.
What a pain in the neck.
The joys of computers.
So are you home rather than in the office?
Yes, it's easier because last time as well, Doug and I were on the same meeting.
Yeah.
And we were across from each other and our speakers are picking up the other person. And they don't work well.
Yeah, that's horrible. There's Cindy. I can't hear you.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
Still morning here where I am.
Yeah, for us it's afternoon. How are things in Alaska?
Doing well. I think no loon problems. We had one notice of some loon in the water acting abnormally, but there were never any calls that we needed to help it. Apparently somebody went out and then it was gone, and often the complaints are that they're acting abnormally and they're really just preening, bathing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Don't mind me, guys. I'm trying to get myself on the right speakers, or the right microphone. Testing. Testing.
Yeah, we can hear you, although your voice is kind of crackly and odd.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out which one works best.
Try this one. I think it's the best bet. We'll go with
That's
that.
good. That's much better, Kath.
As long as Doug is not in the room talking at the same time, we're fine.
Sheila's here, Emily, Rob, John, Jen. Hey, John. How's your head? Can't hear you.
Fine, thanks, Mark.
Yeah. Rob, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
How's your summer been?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, I didn't take any vacation or anything, but you don't need to when you're retired.
Yeah, the only weird thing I find is it's very hard to remember sometimes what day of the week it is. You know,
Yeah.
Are they all Sundays? Are they all Wednesdays? I don't know.
Yeah, so you can't understand your calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to the 2 meetings today.
Yeah, well, we should talk about whether we want to continue doing that sort of thing or not. I mean, there's advantages to having them both together, but it does stretch out the Zoom session a lot. So I was going to talk with the other group about that as well. I think we're going to run into the same issue in September, just because of some other meetings. So we'll see what people want to do.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian. Oh, looks like we're going to have a good turnout today, both numbers and geographically.
Well, yeah, geographically, I'll be the representative from Ottawa, from Canada's
There you
capital.
go. There you go. Yeah, I do think Cindy may hold the record for distance, though. She's up in Alaska.
Wow. But if we need
Technically, I
to,
think Jay and I are quite close together.
okay.
Yeah.
But if we need to engage the prime minister, I can just walk a couple of miles over and go talk to him.
I'm sure he's got nothing else to do this afternoon. So. Erica,
Should
how
we
are
get
you?
going or
What?
should we give it a couple more minutes?
It's entirely up to you. You're the leader.
There's a scary spot. Who are we missing? Nancy. Nancy gives any regrets. Does anybody know?
I hadn't heard anything from Nancy.
I forgot to check my emails for regrets.
Yeah,
But
let
we
me
can
go.
get started.
Okay,
Forgive me if I'm looking in two different directions. I have you guys up on my big screen, my notes up on my small screen. I'm gonna just flip that around. But it looks like I'm looking at you guys. Somewhat. Thank you everybody for joining. Excuse me. Welcome. Just a couple reminders. You guys can all use the chat or you can talk out loud, whichever one works for you. We also have a couple other housekeeping items to keep track of before we get into the meeting. Let me see the new group list. If anybody is interested in registering to join us, I've added the link. I'm not adding people anymore. I will not do that. I have too busy of a life. But on every agenda, there is a link to where you can register people. And there's also the link for the meetings. And that meeting link is good for at least 2 more meetings. And you'll notice I've listed there that, are we still good with working with Zoom? That's a question I have. Since I will not be available for the October and potentially November meeting to lead. And we also have to think about the dates for the meetings. So just to open up the floor, does anybody have any issues with the dates for October, November, December, January through March? Like those ones are pretty far off, but predominantly the rest of this year.
I may not be able to make the October.
Sorry, I
meeting.
just joined the group and I'm not, are they always on a Monday?
Yes, we
Late
try to make it consistent so people can keep it in mind. So it's usually the last Monday of the month. And October 31st is a funny date, especially if you have youngsters. So that might be one we want to shift. I don't worry about that anymore. I will be traveling at that time, so I will not be able to lead. So if Jay or Mark or Erica or Nancy or James can't take over John can't take over the lane, then we may not be able to hold that meeting. Yeah, just something, we don't have to make that decision tonight, but if anybody has any problems with those dates, like October 31st, if that's an issue, it can be changed back. Now, right now, am I right, Mark, that we try to hold our meetings on the 4th Monday and they try to hold the rehab meetings on the 3rd Monday?
that's
Hi,
what we've been doing in the past, but you know, this month we were not able to do that. And I was going to talk to the rehab group about next month as well. Yeah, we're running into some scheduling issues with other meetings.
I just got a note from Nancy. What did she say there? Oh, Nancy is here, but she's having issues with Wi-Fi on campus. Nancy, do you want me? Oh,
Nope,
are you there?
Yep, I got you.
There she
I found
is.
you.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was wondering because you usually let me know when you don't get to make it.
Yeah, no, I made it. I'm here.
We were just doing some housekeeping. I was mentioning, like, I have meetings set up for the next couple months to include the same link for the meetings, and I can continue that on. The question is, how big of an issue is it when I'm not here, which is 2 months in October, November? And does this platform work well for everyone, or do we want to do the Google Groups thing or the Google Meets? And then the other thing I wanted people to spend some time thinking about the October through March meetings and see if we need to adjust any of those times. Oh, and potential leads. We need leads for the October and November meetings as well. How about I just leave those out there for people to think about, and we can bring it up again at the next meeting. Next, anything that anybody wants to add to the agenda or changes?
No, I don't think so.
I like it when this is fast. Mark, considering we haven't had the rehab meeting yet, do you have any updates you want to share?
Not really. Sheila sent me a couple of photographs I was going to go over with the rehab group, just sort of trying to figure out age and plumage condition. I could bring those up now if this group is interested. One of the things I noticed you've got me on here is the avian influenza update. I mean, do we want to talk about, I don't have much to say, which is good news, probably at this point. And I was going to see if anybody else has been hearing any more. Basically, the tests that we've been doing on the necropsy birds have been coming back uniformly negative. I haven't seen any of the tests on the live birds that were sampled from banding yet, John. I don't know if you've gotten any results back. No. And when I go to the USDA website or talk to some of the federal agencies around the country, I think nationwide, and I'm talking US, I don't have as easy access to the Canadian data, but I think we're still in the neighborhood of, under a dozen loons that have been reported as positive in the United States. And some of those in my mind are sort of doubtful because they were positive on swabs, but nobody did any histopathology on them. So I'm not quite sure what that means. So the numbers are small. There certainly are a lot of unexplained mortalities around the US and Canada this summer, but there are always unexplained mortalities. And until we get some of the tests back, we really won't know if these are HPAI or not. When I compare it to the rehabbers I've been talking to, some of the other taxonomic groups, the cormorants and the gulls and the pelicans, the vultures, some of the eagles, the bald eagles in particular, are dying in large numbers across the United States. I was talking to Becky Dewar in California a couple of weeks ago. They hadn't had any avian influenza there, and then they had a wave come across about 3 weeks ago, and large numbers of cormorants and pelicans were dying. But they weren't reporting any loons at that point. So from our narrow taxonomic perspective, I think we're doing pretty well. And it may, as much as anything else, have to do with the social behavior of the loons. They're spread out. We'll see what happens in the fall when they get into some of these pre-migration aggregations on lakes, and whether there's any more disease transmission. We should keep an eye on that. If we start seeing any more birds showing up on shore from the rafts, the post-breeding rafts. But again, I haven't heard any reports of that yet. Kathy, I can't hear you.
I can let you know from the Canadian side, what little I do know is Environment Canada, Canadian Cooperative Wildlife Health Network, and another Canadian super ministry has a dashboard that I just put the link up that shows all the reports in Canada to date. I think they run about a month behind in the reporting. Which doesn't surprise me, it's a lot of work. It looks like I filtered this morning to see if there was any loons listed, and they have no loons identified at this point.
Good.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And Cindy just said that there's no positive loons reported in Alaska, which is good.
But I don't know about testing rate. Most of our loons are out on lakes that are not accessible by road. And that may just reflect that people aren't able to test them.
Yeah, I know that world. So anything else to share on those subjects? Mark, are we good?
No, I think we're basically okay. That's the least of our worries for now.
There's all been negative in Minnesota as well. Google is, James is here. He was going to, Jay is here. Sorry, Jay. He was going to chat a bit today, but he's having Wi-Fi issues on campus as well. But he's willing to take the lead for the October 31st meeting. But he may have to use Google Meet. So you guys can decide if you like that better. And what else do we have here? That's it for that part. So we move on. Education and outreach. Now, since I've been taking the lead on the flyers since Erica turned it over to me, I can continue talking unless, Erica, you feel you're in a place where you want to talk a bit.
Take it away, Kathy.
Yeah, well, the latest draft, the one I told you about last week, is online, and I've emailed it all to you. We had hoped to have some responses from people with regards to it by this week, but we have not, and some of that's my fault for sending it to you so late. But I think the text is pretty good, and we had gone over last week the process for creating that text. So I guess the next steps, working with Nancy and Erica, and if anybody else has ideas, is deciding the final format of it and deciding when we want to take it to our organizations for review and uptake it to use. I think we're there. I think if we spend any more time working on it, other than printing it up, but what are other people's thoughts on this?
I can't say that I've spent any time working on it, but in emails with Tracy Hart at Maine Audubon, I had the impression that she'd put some work into it and had some thoughts that she was sharing with people.
If she had have done it on the earlier version, they would have already been taken into consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody has put any information on the latest version.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like, what do you guys are thinking? Do you like the idea? Just a 2-page fact sheet, 3 when I put it into French? Do you like the idea of having something a little prettier, taking off a little text and putting in some pictures? Because we really don't want to drop the font much. What do you envision the final shareable document to look like?
I like the content, Kathy. I don't know if it needs pictures. I know that on yours, you had sort of these icons for each part, and I think that might be neat if we can fit that into a 2-page. But boy, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I was out a couple weeks, so I'm just getting to looking at this final draft, so it looks good. I guess if I would not mind, I think I can make the time creating a prettier draft. If someone has an example of a really cool layout, I can try to recreate it. I think icons, I think photos, keeping, kind of same font, watch where you're putting your italics and use of color. I can kind of play around with that. If someone shows me something that they like, and I can try to recreate it there.
I will acknowledge that all my work is going to boring, and the reason being is to make it accessible. So I've not been working in pretty fonts. I've been careful with colors lately.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard enough time just remember to putting accessible text on photographs when I build something.
Yes.
So again, it comes right down to, is this something that's going to be stuck in a basket at an Airbnb or a cottage when they rent it, and we want to pretty it up with a gorgeous picture and drop the font? Or do we need 2 versions of it, one for online that's very simple, and one for printing? And then the next thing would be, if you want icons, do we have anybody in the mix who could do them? The ones I use, some were public use. I don't know if anybody remembers my items. Some were public use, and I harassed my 15-year-old into making a few more, but said 15-year-old is in fine arts school this year and he may not want to help his mother. So we can't rely on that harassment being successful this year.
Kathy, when it comes to the print form, I strongly recommend that you keep it to just the 2 pages, both sides of a single sheet of paper. I just worry that anything longer than that, people won't read. When I commented on this a couple of months ago, I was mostly concerned about who the target audience was going to be.
Yes.
And trying to really focus the comments as to the facts that we really want them to take away. Because as they start reading further into it, then they start to lose interest and may not read to the end.
You are very right. And I think, is it 2 pages right now or is it 1? I'm trying to remember.
I think it's
maybe.
2.
Is it 2?
2 sides of.
2 sides of 1 page?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a lot. That's kind of long in some ways, but we have a lot to cover. And the audience is supposed to be pretty non-science, more the lake user and the cottage user. I agree with you. The only reason I say it's going to go to 3 pages because I know when I put into French is always 30% more. So guaranteed French will get a pretty picture and they'll get more text just because it's French. I don't know if Spanish works the same, but I can guarantee you it will be longer on the French form when I finally get it done. Yeah.
But you bring up a good question, and I'd be interested to see what people have to say about this, about having 2 versions. One for online, where people tend to use things differently and it's easier to put graphics or photos in it, versus something that you're going to have on somebody's table in a summer rental, where they're probably not going to read very much, and you may need something to catch their eye at the outset. How do people feel about that?
I think catching the eye is really critical. I think people don't read very much. I think they look at pretty pictures. they look at icons and simple sentences. To do, what not to do.
More, it depends if it's a rainy day or not. They may read.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But, yeah.
It almost seems to me like we might have to cater it to different audiences then, because like a rental, like someone, renting at a resort is going to be different than someone who's, renting a boat is going to be different than someone who's fishing. We might want to emphasize some differences there. That's just a thought.
There's always a chance what the goal is to take the text that is approved by the group and make it available. And then people can adjust it to the person. That wasn't our original goal. Our original goal was one item we could all share and we could all put our logos on it. Right now, I think we're at the point we have too much text at the font that we can even put our logos on it. I was kind of hoping people would say, okay, it's okay to remove this for general audience, but nobody said that. So if anybody wants to have another look and see a sentence that they feel can pull out, if we can save a couple sentences, I like the content.
Yeah.
But it is for a general audience, it is a lot.
Yeah.
And right now I would say the best thing you could do is maybe put it on something that has a row of loons on the left-hand side, just to make it pop or something like that. Or as you said, Erica, the icons are really popular right now. We just need to get them done. There's got to be somebody in the group who has talent.
I might be able to poke our marketing and communications department at Northland and see if they would be able to do that. I don't know right now. They probably wouldn't, because students are coming back and they're busy with that sort of thing. But maybe this fall they might be able to put something together. It'd be great, Kathy, if I could show them, your fact sheet and be like, we want similar icons. And
and you're welcome to. You have it, so go ahead. Corey, when he did the originals, he just did it on his phone. So, but, and he just quickly did them on the phone and off he goes. And then there's, I think half of them he did, and the other half I just pulled from other places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we have access to people we can hire, but that's an expense.
And Nancy put something in the chat about Canva Pro for icons, which I've never used.
I
Yes,
use Canva Pro all the time, but if they have a Loon icon on there, Nancy, I haven't found it yet.
right, but it depends. I guess I was thinking loons for the action items. I mean, the icons for the action items, not just a loon
Ah,
continuation.
Yeah, that's true. And there is set stylized icons to match climate change and industry and fishing tackle. Like there's a lot of those stylized out there already, which is why I could get away with them. You have to be careful with Canva, because some of Canva's graphics are listed as free, but they don't have copyright permission on them,
Ooh,
which is unfortunate. Yeah. So Sheila's got a hand up. Sorry, Sheila, how long has it been out?
Oh, not too long. I had a couple of thoughts. So for our lake association, we have somebody who's in charge of our communications committee for our newsletter, and she created a promo for the lake association with a lot of icons. So I could see if she's willing to look at this and, see if she could do anything with it. My other thought was, I agree that photographs really attract people and might interest them in reading it more. And we created a large Loon Safe boating poster that we've put up at our boat landings. And so the text is imposed on the picture. So I don't know if that would work in a document like this or not. I can't hear you, Kathy.
It works, but it's not accessible. So you have to pick your battles, right?
Yeah.
So think about the age of the people coming to the cottage and to the lake. Are they still at the age? I don't know about you guys, but the arms need to get longer every year. And things like that, because that's one of the reasons why I stopped doing that. It does not seem to have enough contrast often.
Okay.
And but if you took that information and put it on a legal page or on an actual sign, you could do a lot more playing on it.
mhm.
But that's a different audience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I'm gonna just put down that you feel free to set my icons with it if you want. Like take my version if you want, Sheila, and share it with that one if you want to take it to your colleague. Yeah.
One thing we could do, like when I was first looking at the pages, the issues and the what you can do sections both seem equally important, but as we're talking more about putting in icons and pictures, as I'm looking at it again now, maybe you could even have it just be a what you can do section, not to have to put in too much reworking effort, but some of the things could be for example, don't use fertilizers on shorelines to prevent loss of habitat. You can kind of combine to help ease down the amount of text, but that would possibly, require more of the editing on the page. But I think it could even be combined. The issues and the what you can do can be combined into the same kind of sentence, and then that also takes out some of the headlines in there too that take up the space, because those headlines then come with all the blank space next to them too. So that could be one way to help with allowing more space for graphics.
Brian?
If we come up with some additional suggestions after this meeting, who should we forward those to?
That's a good question. Do you want me to keep handling it, Erica? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, then to me, CC Nancy too. And Natasha, if you want to take a stab at that, feel free. That version is available on the the file folder, and you can just open it up. And I think you should have editorial right, but if you don't, just email me and let me know.
Sure,
And
I can see.
there's always a chance copyright editors are handy as well, but I'm not one, and I don't know if any of us have them. It's something that we don't normally have readily available to us. And then you have to be very careful with the copy editor because you can sometimes lose the content in the process. Yeah. So are we hoping to roll this out for next spring? Is that what people would like? Do we set ourselves a deadline?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that would be great.
So how many of us, before we could use it, have to toss it by communications departments? Yeah, Mark, I know you don't. Because that's something I would probably have to do. I don't see it's going to be a big problem because I'm well aware of the content. But so we would probably want to have a pretty final version by, say, February. Does that work for people?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on that part? I'm just checking the chats. There's nothing new there. Okay. All right. So I think we're good on that. Mark, Jay, do you have good enough connection to chat, or do you want me to try to cover your stuff that I have? Did anybody read over Mark's notes or Jay's notes? I'm having a great day with Jay. I'm just forgetting him completely today. I don't think Jay can actually read about this, but I can attempt if nobody else has read over his materials earlier.
You want to do that? Do you want to put them up on the screen? What would be the best?
I'll put them on screen, Ashley. That sounds like a good idea. And we'll see if Jay manages to come on board here or not. All right. All right, so I have him on screen here, and Jay is hoping to spend next time working on some productivity goals and to try to get some standards collected. And his goals are to, y'all can see his sheet now.
Yep.
I'm hoping. Yeah. So his goal is to figure out how best to determine whether chicks have hatched from the nest, or to help determine the probable cause of nest failures. And he goes over the rationale here. I won't go into details on that because it's a lot and it's probably easy to read on your own. So he's hoping to determine a standard protocol that can be used, adopted for surveying a body of water for a loon nest. He's also hoping to identify, by collecting a bunch of photos of loon nests and pictures of eggs and such, a repository of these things, describing them, and links to websites and publications and what have you. And to develop a decision tree, if I'm reading this right, and I'm not basing this on past chats. I don't have, if he's chatting, I can't see it right now. So if somebody sees Jay chatting, let me know. So he wants to, steps will be to collect information from various studies and papers, and he's already collected a couple, and that's on the folder. Collect information from various organizations about current protocols and issues, and collect pictures and data, including scale reference, so something in the picture that shows scale, when possible, to add to the database, such as pictures of nests that have successfully hatched chicks and those that have not, and with information about the potential cause of the nest failure. What else do we have here? I think that's what he said. He would like to have any information we have on those three categories. He would like to have those collected. I think particularly, correct me by chat if I'm wrong, Jay, but he would particularly like to see photos if we have managed to collect them recently and have them added to a folder. I should let Jay know that the folder is not made. I'm hoping he can create it because I don't think I have the memory capacity in my Google documents to handle a lot of photos right now. So I'm hoping he can create it within the main folder, and we can go from there.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to do video then, but Kathy, you hit the nail right on the head. I guess the overall, idea was to see whether or not there'd be interest in the group coming together to devise a way to try to assess whether a loon pair has nested on a lake and whether that pair has successfully hatched chicks. And if not, is there any way to determine the fate of that nest? For many of us, we are unable to do daily surveys of lakes, although some of us have that luxury. But others are probably able to go out once during the incubation period, or maybe even prior to that, and then usually sometime in August, to look for chicks. And because nest failure appears to be a pretty significant cause of failure for being successful reproductively, I didn't know if there's any way that we could try to ascertain post hoc the likely causes for nest failure. And so just I was looking to do a couple of things. One was, again, as Kathy said, to try to accumulate all these papers that are out there describing loon nests, the causes of failure, and some of the characteristics of either the nest or the eggs themselves. And then secondly, to see whether or not there would be some sort of methodology or protocols that are currently used by some of our groups that do, pretty extensive monitoring. And I know some of us actually use webcams to monitor loon nests, and that would be fantastic because there you do have verification of what the causes are. But is there the possibility to take pictures of the nest after a failure, if you know what the cause was and what was sort of the conditions of the nest when the failure happened? So for example, if you know that a raccoon came and took eggs, are there certain characteristics of the shells or of the location of the eggshell fragments that might be helpful to ascertain that? Or if a bald eagle has come and taken an egg and eaten it nearby, are there certain characteristics of the egg that would indicate that? I know it's not going to be perfect science, but I didn't know if there's any way that we can begin to ascertain causes of nest failure, knowing that most of us aren't able to watch nests intensively over the course of a breeding season. So that's what I'd like to do next week, is to try to pull things together about what we know about nesting to help those programs that are still trying to figure those sorts of things out, to share the information we have about characteristics of these failed nests. Because I've been in one part of the world or a couple parts of the world where I've seen it, but my guess is there's been a lot of thought by the rest of you, and you all have the upper hand in terms of really helping me learn about this more and share it, so that maybe even not just in a paper but also on a website we can be helpful. And perhaps some of the groups already do, help their readership find nests, identify them versus non-loon nests, and the causes for failure. So does that help, Kathy? This is my first step in trying to create a rationale and a goal. I don't know if I stated it well either in writing or by talking, but that's the goal. And I don't know if, again, it seemed like there was interest last week to share some of that information. And so next week, I'm just looking for people to share pictures, share ideas, share links and resources to help. And then from that, I thought maybe perhaps we could, even pursue the idea of perhaps coming up with this, I don't know the right word, not dichotomous key, but, a way to sort of systematically look, because that's been tried in a paper that I think I cited there in this little one-page sort of idea box by Wendell's, and I put that paper up on our Google Drive for everybody to look at. And that's maybe one thing to look at before coming next week is to look at that and see if there's any way in which we could amend that, or is it good enough, or is there something that we'd like to add or not add to that? How's that?
Jay, this is Mark. On the Windell's paper, you're talking about the water level management paper?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And there's an appendix for that. So they were
Yeah.
determining the nest, the outcome for the nest. And so there's certain characteristics they described. And
Right.
there's certain things that I've learned and read about too that might be helpful to add to that. But that's sort of where I'm thinking, is that I think that Windell's could be definitely modified in a way, but I don't know if the rest of us would find that useful, or are we all just already doing our own thing, and that's great. But I thought to myself, great, if you're going out surveying looking for loons that have hatched and you've got chicks there, great. But if you don't have chicks, I wonder if you can survey the lake during the August or whenever late July survey, and survey the shore to see if you found a nest and there was evidence that the chicks did hatch or they didn't.
Yeah. Well, Jay, one of the things that makes me think of, and John Cooley and I have had some of these conversations, it's sort of a forensic approach.
Yeah.
And we do the same sort of thing with the cadavers at necropsy. There's wounds on them or something like that. And we're trying to figure out what killed it. Was it an eagle? Was it a boat hit? Is it post-mortem scavenging, And so we've taken lots of measurements and photographs and are beginning to put together data on those kinds of things. One of the discussions that's taken place, and I'm pulling this from human forensics at this point, is environmental DNA. If there's a predator or a scavenger, they've left blood or saliva or feather fragments or things of that nature. They've left evidence. That's not something, I can barely spell PCR. But there are people who are really good at this molecular stuff, and it's the sort of thing that high school students are doing as exercises these days. And it may be where some of this is headed.
Yeah, I mean, we can go off on another tangent with DNA evidence, Mark, but I think even there's been research looking at whole ecosystem community level DNA.
Absolutely.
And impact on certain things, and we've talked a lot about black flies and things like that. It'd be interesting to look at not just individual potential nest predators, but how entire communities are impacting loon populations, which is another discussion for another day. But I think you're right on you're right on track. The only thing I can think, that could be prohibitive is cost, but things are getting a lot cheaper. You can do PCR right out in the field.
Yeah, you can. And Ellen Martinson at the University of Vermont has a lot of students working on this.
Yeah.
And where she can get host DNA out of salivary glands in mosquitoes, and tell what species they've been feeding on.
Yeah.
It's like, holy crap.
Well, and that's something to think about. Would this group as a community want to work on something like that too? I mean, that could be something that could be, heck, we could even write a grant proposal or something. But if it can be helpful in some way to identify the causes of nest failure, I think I think it's an important aspect of the reproductive season that I think. I'd like to know more about that part of it. And heck, we've been having such great success with the nesting platforms, and they've definitely been, a godsend for the loons. Are there other things that we could be doing? And maybe this is something that maybe is not as important, but I thought for those of us that are in Wyoming or Montana, where we don't have video cameras on nests all the time, and we're trying to, we may visit a lake once or twice a year, to be able to ascertain what has happened during that year might be really important for some of those groups that are really remote and just don't have the not the right word is the amount of effort from volunteers and employees.
I
Are
hear you.
we-
Is this making sense to everybody? I mean, I don't want to be going down a road that nobody's interested in either, but I think it's a way in which we can help educate our citizen scientists a little bit better, and maybe we create something that helps them.
Well, John has an interesting idea, and that is creating an iNaturalist project with this. And I think he's got a very interesting idea, but I think we have to get our ducks in a row first. My experience is, and it probably all depends on how the timing of people at your nest sites. My experience is that we have a lot of bias in nest predation and what people think's happen. So I think we need to have us as the experts know what to be looking for, so that when those photos come by, we can, being iNaturalist, and Luke has a question. And so we being on iNaturalist as a professional say, okay, yeah, that looks like such and such a thing, or that looks like that's such and such a thing. And if that's the case, once we have that basic scope, we can really crowdsource that data quite well. So I think that's a great idea, John, in the future. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Luke, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, we took a lot of time to do this for our Minnesota work, hoping that eventually we'll get citizen scientists to do this for us. And so we actually have it built in to our survey 123 that for each nest, whether it's successful or not, that they can take pictures of it at the end with what they have so that we can review it. So over the last 2 years, I mean, we've got pictures of probably close to 200 some failed and successful nests, determined currently at this time just by us as Loon experts, that we can use. But we also go to what what Mark was saying, trying to analyze it. So when we have these failed nests, what evidence is there? Is there scat there? What does that scat look like it came from? Is there hair there? What color is that hair? So, you know, trying to use that approach too. In some cases, there's nothing there. But not that I don't like the idea of using DNA, Mark, but I do, you know, from some other DNA work that I've done, I would be cautious of it because you might be chasing a predator and putting a predator there when they might not have been the cause of that failure.
Yeah.
I mean, say a coon shows up 2 days after and walks across that, and you're really sensitive to that coon DNA. Now you just made that be the predator, but it could have been an otter that was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I've got some hesitation with that, but I like the idea, especially like if there is hair or something at the site or other things going on. So
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, like any other forensic procedure, you put together all the evidence you've got, and, you know, then you try and figure out weight of evidence. I mean, you know, in a former life, many, many years ago, I spent a lot of time identifying hairs under the microscope. I mean, there are keys to mammal hairs. You know, you can clear the hair and look at the scale patterns and the cortex patterns and identify those too. So there's lots of different tools you can use. But at the end, I think, Luke, you're exactly right. You got to have the experts sit down and say, well, we know this about the hair, and we know this about the DNA, and we know this about the eggshell, and we know this about the egg laying date. What was the likely thing that went on? Because unless you've got a nest cam out there that actually shows you when that egg got chewed on, you don't really know.
Yep. Exactly. So.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm going down a route that we're really not going to be able to get too far in terms of pinpointing actual causes. But I thought, well, maybe I at least try and at least get everybody's views. I mean, just having this type of a discussion is exactly what I was thinking about for next month.
I think it's a great idea. Nancy, I'm sorry, Erica, you have your hand up.
Yeah. One of our Sigurd Thielsen award winners did a project using remote sensing cameras, and he looked to see what was the best way to put a camera around a nest to the most effective way. It was Jeff Wilson. And so he discovered what was the least intrusive, most effective way to do remote sense camera observations. And and had a lot of interesting photographs of predations and non-predations that we were expecting to be predations. And it might be something that we can ask some of our very interested volunteers to do, because they had to sort through thousands of photos, but the battery life lasted for a month, which was, you know, approximately what and I think it was more than a month. And those cards, those SD cards now are pretty big. So if they have the time, I think if volunteers have the time, then you could really get some data and some photographs of the actual predation and then what the nest looks like after the predation, just with these remote sensing cameras using this protocol, because I think a lot of people have an idea of how it would be best to place a camera, but I think Jeff really sort of figured out the best method for that. But that's just an idea.
Erica, is there a write-up on that? That sounds interesting to just have available to share with people.
It is. He published in the Passenger Pigeon. I'll send that to everyone.
Cool. That'd be good to have. Yeah, because I always have volunteers who want to go that extra mile, right? All right. So Jay's going to go over this topic next week. Homework, Jay, have everybody review the Windows paper. And you want them to add some documents and photos to the drive, or?
Well, yeah, I think, and you don't need to necessarily read the entire paper, but at the end of that paper, there's a, key that they used to ascertain, cause for nest failure. And I think that's the essence of what I was really interested in. And then, yeah, I mean, sort of like what this discussion we're having right now, and I'm thinking how to best organize it, but to think about whether that it is something that's possible and to begin to compile the information that we have regarding what we know. And so finding papers and adding them, I thought I had Jeff Smith's paper. I know Erica probably has it somewhere. If I find it, I will put it up there. I thought I had it. There was also a study that I think Mike Meyer's crew did in Wisconsin a few years back, looking at raccoon predation using trip cameras in Ottawa, or not Ottawa, in the Rhinelander area, and I think I have that paper too that I can put in there. But and so I guess first thing I really want to do is collect all that we know, that has been published, and all that we know as a group, and to begin to compile. How I organize this discussion next week, I'll figure that out and try to put it into an agenda. But I'm getting ideas thanks to the discussion we're having today.
Okay, and keep in mind with this version of Zoom, we have lots of toys to play with. We can do like whiteboards, and we can put notes together, and there's things that people can go on their own, Jay, and type what they want so that we all share them. Maybe.
Yeah, my biggest thing is I'm even having. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's one of the problems I'm having today is my audio is pretty bad. I don't know if it's the bandwidth of the Wi-Fi or whatnot, but I'm having a tough time hearing people, let alone using a whiteboard. I'm sure I'll make my Zoom, or at least the server, explode on campus for some reason, and so I apologize for that.
That sounds fine. So I think we have a plan. So next time will be just updates and J's, and everybody's good with that.
If just look at that document. I think, did you upload that, Kathy, to our Google Drive? I mean, that's sort of that document you just showed everybody. That's me just sort of trying to begin to assimilate my thoughts, and I don't know if it was perfect. I'm willing to modify it, and in any way, it's just meant to start throwing it down and seeing what sticks.
I'm sure that Luke's group has showed us the survey 1 to 3 in the past, but perhaps that's something that we can share again in the meetings I can't make, if you guys want to see what they're doing with those with the images, if that's helpful as well. Okay. All right. So what's next here? So we have a plan for next week, for next month, and everybody's going to review the dates. I think we're right on time, and that's a lot to talk about. Anything else you guys want to discuss before we go? I should put a plug in for Doug. He did a great cottage life podcast. If anybody would like to listen to it, I'm amazed on how conversational it was on it. So if I probably shared the link already, if I didn't, I can send it to people. And we will also, FYI, I can let you guys know, I can't share anything with you yet. There will be a documentary that involves Doug and Walter Piper's work available in November.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug did a really nice job on that.
Yeah, it's unusual to hear the Loon stuff that easy to understand because it gets so complex.
Yeah.
And explain to people that we can't really do population and we only look at chicks. That's hard for a lot of people to understand as well. Yeah. And that's it. If we have nothing else, we can say good night, and I will make sure notes and recordings get shared. Anybody else have anything to add? Oh, John says thanks. Thanks, John. I hope whatever happened, you make sure you're feeling better.
I look forward to seeing some more of you in about half an hour at the rescue and rehab meeting. So.
Well, then we better get off of this. You guys can get a cup of coffee and use facilities stuff. So I'll talk to you guys all later.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye.